Okay, we've collected quite a bit of gear here. What we're going to try to do in this video is attempt to show all the different, well, not all of them, but a bunch of the different attachment systems that are out there. Ways to attach pouches like these to packs or to load-bearing equipment, or to smaller packs like those. So kind of zooming around here to kind of give an idea of what we're going to be looking at in this video, and then I'm going to come back out here to the tripod and get everything started. So we're working with a new camera. We'll see how it goes. Basically what we're looking at here is quite a bit of gear, and I'm not going to claim that I know everything that's going on here, so I'm going to admit that I'm using a cheat sheet here to keep track of all this stuff. I'm going to start out with the older stuff and come forward towards the newer stuff. I'm going to try to sort out some of the garbage from some of the good stuff, and if that's possible to do in one video, we'll see what we did. So we're starting out with load-bearing gear. It's been around since forever, I guess, and you know, we're basically starting here around World War I era. I don't have anything that's necessarily World War I, but just to kind of demonstrate, this is what we used to use back in the day, just a thick cotton or whatever belt with some grommets basically as a uniform distance apart, and what you'd use is some sort of gear like this that would come in and attach to these grommets. I'm going to try to find two grommets that are in good shape so I don't break them. They would come in and attach to these grommets, and I just set this up to hang from the belt, but if I would have set it to these, it would have been a little higher on the belt like this. Then there's also, let me pull this off real quick. This is fairly strong. I grew up using this stuff as a kid, and it all worked great no matter what we were playing or doing, camping or whatever. So you've also got this type of attachment where it goes through the belt. So that's called LCE, load carrying equipment. And then I'll just mention I've got this knife out here as an example of an older style knife, where again it would line up with the grommets, or you'd go through the slots in the leather through the belt here, but the older style for sure. The buckle on this was a little clumsy, but it was strong. So this is basically what U.S. troops were using starting in the 1910, then it lasted through the 50s and into the 70s. Next came Malice, which is basically just modern load-bearing equipment. So they're a very similar belt. This would have been more in Vietnam era, because it still had the metal clasp for the attachment. Later, in the 80s, this stuff was still pretty much being used, except that you went to a plastic clip type of a belt. And the old stuff would still work with the grommets, but what you moved to real quickly after Malice, or modernized load-bearing equipment, load-carrying equipment, you move to the all-purpose lightweight individual carrying equipment, or Alice. And the first Alice stuff was cotton too. And if you haven't used Alice before, it's fairly simple. You just open up those clasps, and the belt goes in, and it gives you infinite adjustability for the most part. And a lot of times what we would do would be to just use some 550 cord to attach our gear to the belt using the grommets, so that this stuff didn't slide too much on it. So that's some Alice gear, and those Alice clips were also used in the nylon stuff. This is an aftermarket, and this is the cheap one. Although it's still technically an Alice clip, it doesn't work very well, and it's really cheap. Where this actual military one works awesome, and it's super strong. It's like spring steel compared to tin can metal. So garbage aftermarket, made out of nylon, and it looks right, but all the stuff, all the material and all the construction is kind of cheap. So so that's the Alice. Now we're moving up to PALS. And the PALS is basically the nylon ladders that Molle, the system, uses to attach. So Molle is the concept of modular gear going together with vests and with packs and with pouches and things being modular. And PALS is the ladder system that allows Molle to work. So PALS is pouch attachment ladder system, and Molle is modular lightweight load carrying equipment. So everything in the military's got an acronym like that or whatever. So that's basically what we're looking at for the most part, is going to be PALS systems for the Molle gear. I just kind of briefly touched on some of that other stuff, and I've got some more modern versions of it here. If we got a chance to get to it, great. So to begin, they started out with the beginning, and that's the Natick snap. I might be saying that wrong, might be Natick snap, I'm not sure. Basically what it is though is, again, I should mention that what PALS is. The PALS that I mentioned is the nylon straps, and there's an actual definition of PALS. It's a grid of webbing sewn in rows. I'm going to use this as an example because it's easy to grab. It's a grid of webbing sewed in rows spaced 1 inch apart horizontally, and the webbing is tacked every 1.5 inches, creating columns. And that's the literal definition of the PALS ladder system for the modular lightweight load-bearing equipment Molle system of pouches and packs and stuff. So the idea being that this was the original one. This is a government issue magazine pouch for a rifle, and it's got the PALS, which is the grid of 1 inch webbing, and you can see how when it lays down here, the columns line right up. And it kind of makes sense. What's going to happen is this piece of nylon, which is 1 inch, is going to slip down over one, inside of here, inside of here, inside of here, and then inside of here, and create a strong attachment. And then at the bottom, it's going to snap. And that's called the Natick snap. And I believe that was the first stuff. And that's pretty much what most of the military stuff is using. And the way that it's created is it's sewn at the top, which is, not necessarily the best way to go. And then the 1 inch webbing is brought down and then folded back on itself. And inside of here, you see it doesn't bend. There's a piece of plastic or something in there. So it comes here, here, and it wraps that piece of plastic. So it's fairly flexible here, but it's really not flexible here. And the idea being there is that, imagine again that this is connected to the pack or whatever. The pack's webbing is here, here, and here, and this is going to thread through. If it was very loose, it would allow the pouch and the pack to separate. So by being a stiffer piece of plastic, it doesn't allow the pack and the pouch to separate very much. And since it's a 1 inch webbing going through a 1.5 inch opening between the stitching, then it doesn't allow a lot of play. And you can see that if my finger was the webbing on the PALS webbing on the pack, I don't have a lot of room for slack there. And there would be a row of webbing here, a row of webbing here, a row of webbing here, and then the snap would come down on top of it. They've also got Natick snaps, say that 10 times fast, with just one row of webbing, and this is a smaller pouch, of course, so it doesn't need to carry so much weight. So when it's the same concept. It's the hard, stiff piece of plastic inside with the snap and everything. So the pack, this goes over and then under and then over again. So it's only going to really attach with one of its own rows of PAL. And this is just the difference between this one and this other one that had two, the size of the pack and the amount of weight that they're going to be carrying. Another option is, another way of looking at this one is the one made by Eagle Industries. This is an Eagle Industries dual mag pouch. And again, you know, because of the weight, it doesn't need more than one row of PALs here. But you can see, even though these are made by different companies, this one is made by Blackhawk. So let's say not as high quality as the Eagle one there. They're both using the PAL's grid system, but where Blackhawk is just put two straps down, Eagle has done the appropriate 1.5 inches between seams and then double stitched it so that it's not only going to match up more correctly with the pack or the pouch, but it's also going to sort of work on the grid better. You know, again, the sizes are different. If you don't care about that, then this is a great way to go. But it's just not the same as having it uniform or consistent as the companies that pay a little bit more attention to the actual sizes of the sewing and whatnot. Another difference here, just since I'm looking at it, is look how small this clasp is. The reason I don't use this, it's got a knife in it right now, because I just put it on one of my vests that I never wear really. This thing is real difficult to get at, as opposed to this one, for example, which is just much more substantial, and even with gloves on, very easy to open this one. So that's just something to look at when you're comparing pouches and buying different things. So that's the Natick snap in both the smaller and the larger lengths. If I won't go into so much detail on necessarily on some of these others, because they're all going to be the same concept. Different companies came up with their own ideas of how to accomplish the same goal, though, which is to attach these rows of webbing to each other. I'm doing them in order of an article we did a while back, just because that's what I printed out as my cheat sheet. Next, I'm going to grab a Tack Fit by Spyderco. And this is a Spyderco first aid kit, which is pretty cool. And I like it a lot. And again, we're using correct PALS grid here. And we've got an extra piece of PALS, or an extra piece of webbing down there. So same concept, over and under. So this one is designed to thread a little bit differently. Because of these plastics, this is designed to be released easier. And I'm going to have to show that in its own video probably. But imagine this coming down and then at the bottom locking back up into position instead of having a snap at the bottom. It did the weave like normal, but then at the end, instead of having a snap, it backs in up on itself. And when it does, this other smaller strap is captured and pushed under. And what that means for you is if you wanted to remove this, because it's a first aid kit, there's a potential you might want to remove this and render aid. Now you can grab these small black ones and pull it. It's not going to just fall off. You're going to still have to pull it through the PALS grid on whatever it was attached to. But this is a great kind of a fast release way. And this one's made by Tack Fit. It's called the Tack Fit by Skedco. And I'll probably do a review on this one by itself because it is pretty cool. Just checking the time here. Are we really at 15 minutes? Alright, I'm going to go a bit quicker then. So next we got Malice clips by Tactical Tailor. And these are sort of a rubber polyurethane, I suppose. And you can see them in action right here. They sort of go in, and again, they're we're now talking about attachment systems that aren't sewn to the unit, so they're coming up and over. So this first one comes up. Now the pack comes in and it threads through, and instead of having a snap like the Natick snap, it's going to feed into itself. And I'll just show you here. It's going to feed into itself and sort of lock in sort of a hole and plug type of lock system. And then this one, you would push a screwdriver or something into this hole in the back, and then they've made these newer ones that when they connect, because it's a little easier sometimes to see stuff, you can flip up on this. Instead of having to push in, you just kind of put in a screwdriver or some sort of piece of something to move this up, and then they disconnect and open up and open out. There's the half size that uses 3 rows of PALs, and then there's the larger size, which uses 1, 2, 3, well, sorry, the smaller size uses just 2 rows of PALs, the larger one uses 3, and then there's also a green color. So there's different colors of these as well. Now we've got the Soft Snap by Tactical Assault Gear. That's this one. So Tactical Assault Gear, again, made their own. And the idea of this one is I'm going to come, let's see, down through the gear and then back up. And again, if I need to remove it quickly, I just pull this part down and pull this back out through the gear. And I'll do some stills and we'll do some video or something on these individually if necessary to show how they work. So that's Tactical Assault Gear's Soft Snap. Then we've got the Annex clips by ITW. and these are clips that are going to attach to the PAL's webbing on the pouch, or you can put it on the pack, doesn't matter. So you put the clip onto the webbing, and then it's going to go through to the other side. And I think I have one in action right here. I've only connected two, but you see how these, instead of being staggered, these line up with each other, so they sort of shift everything on your grid depending on how big a pattern or what you're doing. You know, that might be an issue for you, but that's an option when you have basically a pouch, well, like these that don't have anything actually sewn in, they're just a grid of webbing. That's where these can allow you to attach them fairly easily, and the nice thing about them is they're not as difficult to open and close. So when they're attached like this, you just sort of squeeze them at the bottom and they open right up. I'm only concerned how strong they are, but I assume with 3 of them, you know, you've probably got some pretty decent straight. I haven't heard any bad comments on them, I just haven't used them a lot. So that's the Annex clip by ITW. Next is the Flex Tab by Tack. One of my favorite packs, or favorite pouches I should say. This one uses 3 rows of PALs sewn on the correct 1.5" pattern. Great sewing. Tack has got to be one of the best like pack and pouch companies out there that have met them. They're great people. This one comes down, you know, it threads through, and then as it gets to the bottom, it's just sewn a little bit larger, or excuse me, a little bit longer, and you can see how it sort of locks there. So it's called the Flex Tab, and you literally just go like this to get rid, you know, to speed it back out. It's not necessarily a quick release, but it's great. It actually reduces weight, in my opinion, because you're using a little less webbing on each of your locks. I've used this one a lot. I had to pull it off of my gear. I don't know if you can tell, it's kind of dirty compared to the other stuff out here. I've used it a lot. I've never had it anywhere near come loose. It's super strong, super quiet. They just make good stuff, and they made a good attachment system as well. So next up is just the generic garbage. And actually I didn't even put an example of it out here. I guess this is a good example of it though. This is off of just some cheap pack or rifle case that we've got. You know, you don't always necessarily have to have the best gear, especially for something simple. And these are something that just is a good example. The plastic, this is a Natick snap type of system, but the plastic is all cut wrong. It looks all irregular or something. It's not quite on the 1.5". I'd say it's more like on the 2". You know, they just decided to sew it somewhere. It's actually 2.5 inches between, so it's grid patterns off. Maybe they did that on purpose so they don't get sued. I have no idea. Also, the snaps are crap. You can unsnap them from any direction. A decent company is going to put one direction dot snaps on so that they're only going to open from one direction, and it's usually locked in the position where it's really awkward to snap them, just so that they don't come loose. So the generic stuff is just going to be sloppy. It's going to be made out of inferior stuff. There's no way to show it on the video, I don't think, but this plastic on these clips is just garbage. You know, it's really soft and brittle. It's gross. When you see this stuff lined like this, it's almost always because they're using the vinyl back nylon. So in order to make their nylon seem more stiff, like a good 1000 denier nylon that you're going to get on American-made gear, where on the American-made gear, on the back of your nylon, you see the other side of the nylon. When they're doing cheap garbage, they'll use nylon on one side and they'll back it with this, whatever this stuff is, a lighter weight nylon, like a raincoat. And the idea is that they don't want you to see the garbage on the back of this, which is that stuff that used to flake off on our older packs. And they just quit using that stuff. It pretty much looks like this, like vinyl. They quit using that stuff because it flakes off and people don't buy their stuff over and over. So this way, again, if you're not doing anything technical with it, this is probably a great little pack. I used it for a little while for my tiny laptop here, and it worked really good for it. But it's, you know, not a great pack. I definitely wouldn't carry anything super valuable. I never carried it by the attachment system. I just kept the computer in here as a cover. Anyway, that's some cheap gear and some reasons why it's cheap here. Inferior materials and inferior workmanship. I'm hoping that shows up on the video. 22 minutes. Okay, I think we can still do this within a half an hour for everybody. We've got this sewed just, you know, pretty ineffectively, and it's now ripped off. Again, the not sewn to the 1.5-inch grid, which allowed it to shift around. And I basically put too much stuff in this pack, and it shifted so much that it just gave all this stuff a chance to move and rip. So garbage gear, you know, don't expect it to last real long. We still got a couple of more attachment systems to go through. I think I might have an example of this out here. This pack, for example, just has, I don't really use this pack much. It's a nice pack and everything, but it's just not one that I, you know, care about too much. I don't use it on my first line gear or anything. So I didn't want to waste any of my attachment stuff, like a Malice clip, which is basically what I should be using here. So instead of using the Malice clip, I did the same thing. I threaded it through 3 rows of pals, except that I just used 550 cord. And if you can see with the clarity there, it's just wrapped through. I mean, there's no brain surgery there. I take some 550 cord and I double it up, and then I just feed it through, and I do it enough times that the gear is secure. And it is. I went, you know, I went 3 columns, which is as many columns as it had, and it's fairly secure on there. Again, this isn't something I use every day, and you can really put a lot of weight on 550 cord. One thing that we sort of didn't mention back when we were talking about Alice gear, and I should mention it real quick, is these Bianchi quick lock. And this is on an old Gerber knife sheath, but it's also on these Bianchi holsters. So it's a great lock. I really like it. It's designed to basically work with the old Malice stuff from Vietnam, and actually a little bit newer than Vietnam, but to work with, you know, to retrofit to that old stuff. But it also works with just any belt, and this particular one, and almost every one I've seen, has this rubber belt loop behind it as well. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that one. And it will also work with the PALS grids. Should get a better grid out here. This stuff will work with the PALS grid just fine. I just don't like to use it too much because since it is metal, you know, it's going to wear your grid out. Then we've just got plain old belt loops, snapped on belt loops, which a lot of duty gear is made this way. Now this is a fairly inexpensive, I won't mention the brand, but not an expensive one. This is long before PALS webbing, I'm sure, and this is probably designed to be more of a duty type of gear. But basically, you know, your belt would be running this way. You have one solid belt loop, but then you've got these snap loops, and these didn't come with this particular mag pouch, but I'm using them in this capacity. It also happens to have a couple of straps this way, so this one's fairly modular, but the idea here is that you can still use these snaps with the Molle stuff. It's just that it's a little tougher and a little weaker, and that's what I'd be concerned about with the snaps, is that it's too easy for the gear to get snagged on something and those snaps to just give loose. Anyway, now we're looking at the ATS fastener, and this one's another adaptation of the Natick snap. Instead of just snapping to the case, which is sort of a pain in the butt sometimes, it allows you to snap the, you know, put your finger under there basically. I'm going to grab that Natick snap one again, and here's the cheap one, but basically the difference is that the snap is down there on the pouch, and in this little one it's no big deal. If I had a larger pouch though, then like this one, it's just real difficult to get to that snap. I can push on it all day, but sometimes it just keeps giving and never really snaps. So this one, you know, eliminates that, and at the same time it makes it easy to remove. Sorry, I should have done it the right way. You just pull this thing and it removes fairly easily. Because it's all woven through there, of course, it's not like it's going to fall off or anything, but you know, it is easy to take apart as well. Next up will be the snap loops from MDOM. So I've got an MDOM pouch here that uses snap loops, and it's just their version of the snap loop, similar to these for duty gear, but you know, these are just a much softer nylon and much more malleable, where these, and those are junky snaps, where these are 1-inch nylon running through the correct grid so they don't get a lot of play, especially once they're woven through, and then once they're snapped, it's smooth and there's really no stress. There's no reason for this to want to unsnap, in other words. It'll be pushed against it to some extent, so there's no tension, or there's no force against the snap, so there's no reason for them to unsnap. I haven't used these personally, but I know a couple of guys that have, and they work just great, so there's no complaints about those. And then the difference to them would be Spectre gears, which are these, and the difference is that these snap in a different, instead of being in a loop, they snap like this instead of like this. So now these come through. It's got the hard insert like the Natick snaps, and the big difference between these and a Natick snap is that these aren't connected to the gear. These can be pulled through or used on other gear, where the Natick snap is sewn at the top and the snap is sewn at the bottom. So this is a little more modular, adaptable, and that one is the Spectre gears snap loop. I think that's as many as I have the names of, but there are probably a couple I should still address. You're going to run into gear. The only reason I brought this one out is you're going to run into gear sometimes that just wasn't made for this type of system, but a lot of times that doesn't have to be a big problem. This one, for example, is designed to be a drop leg medical pouch, and it works great in that role. But for some reason, if I needed to and I wanted to attach it to Molle, the strap that allows your leg strap to go through could easily have 550 cord run through it and then tied on to the Molle gear. Up at the top here where this clip, sort of a hinge for the drop leg holster, that part could be taken off, and again 550 cord could be used. So it's possible to adapt older gear to the newer styles, and that's the only reason I brought that one out. And this is just another example of the garbage. Got a couple of knife examples there, but let's bring out a more modern knife example. This is the Gerber BMF2 modular type of sheath, and then it has a nylon adapter running through with a Natick snap type, I guess, because it's sewn, and it has little off measurement because of course the sheath isn't big enough to be the full 1.5 inches. Anyway, it would still connect well. Sewn really decently up here. The snap is in pretty decent. Snaps real easily against the hard sheath. But the big difference is here you've got Velcro. So once this is attached to your gear, this can be removed and you can use the knife sharpener, which is built right into the sheath here. So this is a highly modular and efficient use of the the Molle system, and a bit of a hybrid of the PALS webbing. Now this one is a Benchmade sheath, well, a Benchmade knife in a sheath made for Benchmade by Eagle Industries, one of our favorite companies. And this one's designed to use the full-size Malice clips. I guess I don't have it here, or really any of these other snap devices. Some, basically it has the 1.5 inches, and they just happen to build their, knives or, in this size, happen to work with the 1.5 inch strap. But it also has this Velcro type of belt loop, like we mentioned. And again, these can be fairly secure. And then I found that for me, what I'll do sometimes if I'm taking this knife with me on a hike or something, I can just thread this piece of 550 that's already attached to the bottom of the sheath. I'll thread that up and then back down, and that gives me almost 2 rows, it gives me a full tight connection to a pack or whatever, and that's something I can real easily remove, and I just leave it attached to the sheath. It's actually probably supposed to go around my leg as a tie. I just don't really carry knives that way. So anyway, that's another reason that this Molle and the PALS ladder system is so modular. I guess I was looking for this a little earlier. This is just, a lot of the pouches will be made this way. It's not true PALS because it's not inch apart, but it's designed so you can use it with these snaps, or you can use it with a snap loop. You could use it with the Malice, so there's lots of different options when you're dealing with this. Finally, I wanted to mention these carabiners and whatnot. The Grimlocks are these polymer, basically a polymer carabiner. They're meant to only hold so much weight, and then they will break so that you can't get hurt with them. But they're great. They're actually designed for the PALS system. So we would get something that has easy pouch to put it on. It's a little easier to show you here, so that's where I'm going to show you. You take a 1-inch strap and you come in on the long side and then kind of scrunch it up and it goes into the short side, and now that's attached to the 1-inch strap. We almost always put them on the shoulder straps of our backs with hydration tubes because it's a quick way to retain your hydration tube, but it also allows you to let it go. So sometimes, you know, we'll have these things sitting and we're going to drink out of them. We don't want it attached to the back strap or to the pack strap. So that's what the Grimlocks are, and they're not expensive. You can get those pretty much anywhere now. The cheap Carabiners are nice, just of course you can't use them with too much weight, but sometimes it's actually a benefit to have these that are aluminum and cheap, because you don't want your gear to catch on something and get hurt with it. So sometimes it's nice to have those sort of a breakaway. This is another one. This one is made by Petal, that does a lot of climbing gear and that kind of equipment. We did a review on this one time before, but again, it's designed to, I don't think it's designed for PALs necessarily. I think it's designed for climbing, but it works real great with PALs. And you can see that it comes through, clips onto the webbing, and now it creates a place where I can quickly attach something and quickly get something out of there. So again, gloves or hearing protection or whatever you might need to quickly get at and let go of. And then along the same lines is just a larger, inexpensive aluminum carabiner. This was literally from a dollar store, so this was $1. And you would go, I usually run it on the back of my gear. If we're in a training class, I forget what training class we first found the idea at, but people will run one of these, or even larger ones, in their gear on the in their back. And what this is for is if the instructor needs to move you forward or backwards, if you're doing a shooting drill or something, this gives them a handle basically. And it's not something you have to leave there. It's real easy to pull back off when you're not in training. But I leave them out here because, again, I've actually found that having these around for that reason, you can use them as an attachment system. It's a little more clunky, but when you're all done, you're left with this sort of useful carabiner behind your gear. So it's a neat one, something to consider. Another one is the locking carabiners, and I almost always have these with my gear, mainly because we live in Arizona where there's the potential that somebody's going to fall down a mine shaft. So I like to run them on these carry handles. Most of the gear that we use is military gear, and it has they have substantial carry handles so that your gear can be weighted down with a lot of weight, or you can be attached to you and they can pull you in a situation, you know, in a military situation, they might need to pull you to safety. But in our situation, you know, me might want to drop this gear with some 550 cord to a friend who fell down a mine shaft, or I don't know, you know, all kinds of weird things can happen. So I like to carry a decent carabiner, one that's either made for climbing, or like this one that's made for working on the electric lines, so it's just a little more sturdy even than the climbing ones. So I think I've covered a lot of stuff on gear here. I think I'm probably at like 40 minutes, so I'm going to have to edit a lot of it down. If it was at all interesting for anybody, put it in the comments. You know, we're still trying to figure out what's interesting and what's not, what's going to bore people to death, and what has got them sitting on the edge of their seats. So, oh, I guess I should mention this because Magpul's a cool company. This is a Magpul threader. And you know, sometimes if you're dealing with a hydration system or something that's got a very, you know, just hard to get to, something that's using the typical Natick snaps, like that first one we looked at, where they're stiff. This was a while ago, so here we go. So what it's going to do though, this one's actually brand new. What it's going to do is allow you to sort of snake this stiff, I guess, polyurethane thing through the system. So we'll grab our sample ladder here. We're going to want to put it through here. We can just snake this thing up. Oops, we just snake this thing through. And then up at the top here. So it's holding on to our snap for us now, and it caught it on both sides. So it's going to basically open up that gap and allow the snap to just feed right on through. and you can see bang, bang, bang. Unless you've got one that's poorly made and the grid is in an improper place, it's a very easy way to get these stiff deals down through. Now, of course, I did this as an example, and I didn't include the pouch itself, which I would need to do. But it's a inexpensive tool, and if you're going to be doing this a lot, definitely worth the money. And Magpul's a great company, so you couldn't spend it at a better place. And that was our review of the various load-bearing gear, and primarily the Molle system, using the PALS ladders. Tried to take a look at some of the various options from the different manufacturers and different methods that they've come up with, and hopefully it was interesting. Let us know in the comments what you think. Always interested to get feedback from people that have been watching our stuff.